Okay, I'm going to start with a pop quiz. So just raise your hand if you find your answer, okay? So how do you fall asleep at night? Do you read books? Do you maybe play on your phone? Do you watch a movie? Or are you kind of old-fashioned and count sheep? When I was a child, I used to like to tell myself stories to fall asleep. Now, I had to be very quiet because my sisters were in the other room and they didn't like to be woken up. So I would start the stories at first in my head. But as the stories got more exciting and my characters did all these wonderful things, my voice would get a little louder and I would whisper. Then it would get a little louder and a little louder until I heard, "Be quiet, shut up." So I put the story back in my head. But then, you guessed it, it would get more exciting. The characters would do all these wonderful things. And so I'd start to whisper, and then louder and louder and louder until, "Be quiet." So I love stories, and I love this event because I love listening to everyone's stories. I like to tell stories. I like to write stories. In 2017, I thought that was the year that I was going to start working towards getting my book published. And I thought this was going to be the year of Sarah. This was going to be the year, 2017, the year. Something wonderful was going to happen. I felt God was telling me that. It was great. That was in July of 2017. In September of 2017, if some of you remember, we had a little thing here called Irma. And I thought, okay, so it derailed me for a little bit. But I thought, we live in Florida. Hurricanes are to be expected. We can go on. But before Irma even hit Central Florida, I get a call in the middle of the night. And it's my dad. My brother has died by suicide. My life I was devastated. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't the year of Sarah. It wasn't an awesome thing. It wasn't in my plans. I didn't know why this had happened. I didn't understand it. And I was engulfed in my grief. I would cry every day, and for months and months, it was hard to get through the day. And finally, my husband said to me, "Something's got to change." And I said, "You're right, something has to change." And so I started going to a grief group at our church. And it really helped me to process through a lot of the trauma and a lot of the pain. But what helped the most was one Sunday in church, we were taking communion. It was before COVID, so we had the old-style communion cups and the wafer separate. And I was looking at that glass of grape juice. And you see, at our church, we take communion to remember Jesus' death. We take it to give Jesus' death meaning. And as I'm looking at that, I'm reminded of my brother and his death. And I'm thinking that his death has no meaning. When someone takes their own life, they leave behind a trail of hurt and pain. There's no meaning, no purpose. That's what I thought. But as I'm looking at that glass, I think if I tell his story and I tell my story, I can give his death meaning. I can make it matter. You see, we grew up in the same house, so there's a lot of similarities between my story and his story, but there's also some differences. On the surface, our family looked great. My dad was a pastor, and he was really involved in the community. He was a nice guy, and we had a wonderful mom, great siblings, and everything seemed wonderful on the outside. But when we went home, my dad would verbally abuse my siblings and I and my mom. It wasn't an easy place to grow up. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of drama, and it was really hard. I thought that when I went to college, that was going to be my fresh start. That was going to be when I could start living my story, start pursuing my dreams. And at first, it was. It was awesome. I was away from my parents, away from my family. My brother did go to school, but that was okay at first, and everything was great. But then my brother comes to me and tells me that he has something he wants to discuss with me. He says that when he was a child, a cousin sexually molested him. I was shocked. I had no idea that it happened. And I didn't know what to say to him. I said, "I'm sorry that happened." And he said that there was something else he wanted to discuss with me. There was something more he wanted to say. I didn't know what it could be after that big bombshell. He said, He asked me, did I ever do anything like that to you? And I give him a confused look because, no, what do you mean? He's my brother, my older brother. I idolized him. We were best friends. He protected me. He was the one I went to when my dad would yell and he would stick up for me. He knew what it was like to live in that house. And he's asking me, did I ever sexually abuse you? No, he couldn't have. Not my older brother, not my hero. He couldn't have, no. So I go back to my dorm room after I've told him no, and I begin to see images in my mind. No one else can see them, just me. And they're flashbacks from memories I had repressed years ago. My brother had sexually molested me. My life was a nightmare. I didn't know how to deal with it. I had all these emotions, and I couldn't stuff them back in. It was as if I was dealing with the pain once again. The pain that I hadn't let myself deal with, it was fresh, and the memories in my mind wouldn't go back in. I couldn't stuff them back in. They were out. And I was in a pit. If you remember in the 80s, if you can remember that far back, or if you were alive then, there was a story about baby Jessica. Baby Jessica got lost in a well. She fell in a well. She couldn't get out. And I'm assuming there were no handholds for her to climb out, but she was just a baby, so she couldn't have anyway. And they had to mount this huge rescue operation. That was me. I was in a pit. There was no way out, and no one was going to come rescue me. I needed a ladder, a way to get out, and I didn't see anyone to bring me that ladder. Fortunately, I was able to get out. But I have to tell you, I'm still climbing. I still deal with depression. I still deal with anxiety. I still deal with effects of childhood trauma. But I'm still climbing out of that pit. It's a process. But the rungs on the ladder that helped me to get out of the pit, I have 6 of them, and I want to share them with you today. The first one is exercising. When I wanted to stay in bed, I didn't. I got out, and I started moving, and I exercised. It helped me to work through a lot of my anger. The second rung on my ladder was journaling. I wrote my feelings down. And it was really hard because sometimes my feelings were, and how do you write that down? So I would scribble. And I actually started scribbling with my non-dominant hand, which is a technique that I learned in my self-help books, which is a third step. A lot of self-help books really spoke truth into my life. And it was before I could even go to counseling because I didn't want to talk to someone about what had happened because I'd kept the memories inside so long. I'd kept everything a secret for so long that it was hard to speak those words out loud. I was very ashamed. But the self-help books helped because I could read those without having to tell anyone. The 5th rung on my ladder was my faith. I clung to my faith in Jesus Christ. He gave me something to hope for. And the last rung that I want to talk about is my counseling. There is no shame in going to counseling. There's no shame in reaching out. Sometimes you need professional help, and that's okay. I needed professional help. I needed a counselor. It was really hard for me to make that appointment to the college counseling center. It was hard to climb those stairs. In fact, the first time counselor I went to, I left. I started talking and I just walked out of the room, but I came back. If you've had a similar experience, keep going back. So the greatest breakthrough happened in counseling one day when I wanted to share a particular experience with my counselor. It was a horrific flashback that I had been having. And I couldn't say the words out loud. I was too ashamed. It seemed too horrible to say out loud. And he said, that's okay. I want you to picture a safe place away from all that pain. And it was hard, but I did. I pictured soft green grass, and I sunk down into that grass, and then there was a tree, and I leaned back against the tree, and there was water, and it was so peaceful, so relaxing. Then he said, I want you to picture God next to you. And I said, no, I don't want God next to me because he was up in heaven saying, ha ha, you got what you deserved. At least that's what I thought he had been saying. And he said, no, can you picture God next to you? And I said, okay. Reluctantly, I did. I pictured God next to me. And then he said, I want you to journey to the memory. And so I did, but as soon as I was in that memory, I had to open my eyes, and I said, I can't do this. He He said, it's okay, go back to your safe place. I did, and then I tried to journey to the memory again. It took a few times until I was able to go back into that memory and stay with those emotions. And when I was there, he asked me, where is God? And I looked around, and I could only see hurt and pain, and I saw what had happened, and I wanted to leave, and he said, where is God? And I said, he's not here. He said, no, look again. Where is God? And I looked, and I saw him. He was there. He was holding my hand, and he was crying. If you've been abused, it's not your fault. No matter what you're struggling with today, you're not alone. You're brave for being here. You're brave for putting one foot in front of another. As I told you, my brother and I, our stories are very similar, but they also have a difference. The difference is the ending. And you get to choose today. So many things were done to me, and so many things may have been done to you that you can't control. But you get to control today how your story is going to end. Are you going to continue to be brave?